Bible study for this evening. As we continue on in managing church conflict, once you come over, just say hello so that we know that you have migrated over from our conversation with our pastor now into our Bible study. I really enjoyed our conversation with the pastor and the first lady. We really are fortunate to really get some very thoughtful and deep conversation as we prepare, as we grow in Christ. So thank you, Pastor and First Lady, for that time. So come on over to the chat and ask some questions or put some thoughts in about chapter 9 tonight with our Managing Church Conflict by Dr. Hugh Halverstad. Really looking forward to it tonight. Give everyone a couple more minutes and we'll have a word of prayer, and then we'll get right into it for our chapter. All right, let us go ahead and pray. Our Father and our God, we thank you for another day. We thank you, oh God, for another opportunity for us to come together. Lord, right now we ask a blessing upon our pastor and our First Lady. We ask a blessing upon each member of our church. Lord, we ask a blessing upon this world, oh God, because right now we need you more than ever. So, Lord, come into our homes, come into our work, come into our schools, come into our hearts. So, Lord, that we may start to proclaim your name more, because we need to start really adhering to the word that you have given us. Lord, we love you and we thank you for everything that you are doing that you have done. Lord, continue to put your hedge of protection around us. Lord, just thank you for another day. We just can't thank you enough. Thank you for being God all by yourself. And we just say thank you for it. This we ask in your name. Thank God.
Thank God.
Amen.
Amen.
So, chapter 9 tonight is step 3, constraining strategies, changing contextual factors. And tonight, Dr. Halverstad is really talking to us, and it was so great. We actually kind of talked about it today in our conversation earlier, that Christians have a hard, what he put in the first line of the book, what I thought was really important. Christians have a hard time trying to change others by persuasion. When we have persuasion, we hear sermons, we have Sunday school lessons, we have pastoral counseling. Those are ways for people to be basically persuaded that God is moving. But do we actually listen to the messages that we are receiving, whether from sermons and Sunday school, the pastoral counseling, the sessions that we have on YouTube? Are we using the information that God has given the vessel to actually apply to our lives? And if we are, that should help us in terms of dealing with the conflicts that arise in the church. He speaks of a direct versus indirect conflict. And he uses the example of back in the 1970s when the federal government started really talking about smoking. They use advertisements to really deter people from smoking. They offer education on the health effects of smoking. And that was an indirect way to really tell people who are smokers, stop smoking. And in the 1980s, 1990s, 2000, they really they started a direct approach to people who were smoking. This is the example that Dr. Haversack gives. And the direct approach was, smoking is an addiction. Smoking causes cancer. Smoking, now we're taking it out of restaurants. You know, I remember growing up, and I know some of you remember when there was smoking in restaurants, they always said the smoking and non-smoking section, but you really said the non-smoking section had the smoke coming over from the smoking section. So I don't know why they always classified it as smoking versus non-smoking, because it really was not. But Halverson is talking about the direct versus indirect. So the government changed its approach and started being really direct, trying to really speak to the people who were smoking. And so he uses that illustration to really help us with the conflict. Are we going to do a direct approach or indirect approach? Are we going to speak just to the group because we don't want to speak to the individual? So we take the indirect approach by saying very general statements. I didn't like this particular thing in the planning of a program. Instead of saying, I didn't like the way brother or sisters actually conducted the meeting, they were very aggressive, they were very short, we take the indirect approach. So, in terms of managing church conflict, and excuse the background noise with the plane, um, we have an option tonight. Are we going to take the direct? Or are we going to be indirect? And I would hope that over the course of these 8 chapters, and now we're into the 9th chapter, that we really seriously consider that we need to be direct with people. And that is really, I thank God for speaking to the pastor and to the first lady, because work it out is really what we're talking about tonight. What we discussed in the first hour and really carrying over into the second hour. Are you really willing to have those direct conversations with folks? And sometimes those direct conversations are not comfortable. Um, they really start for you to be reflective about yourself and what you contributed to the situation or to the concern. But Dr. Halverstad, I really speaks to that. He also goes on to say tonight is that he talks about American individualism. And the part of American individualism is that we only care about ourselves, and we don't care about trying to actually resolve the issue. We just only want to see our interests to the forefront, our values to the forefront, our concerns being resolved, and we never really work together to really resolve all the issues that people are faced with. We see now in our country right now that there is a major divide, and people don't want to have a conversation about the institutional racism that has gone on for generations in this country, for our politics that are stalled. But even from a national perspective, let's talk locally. How many of us are actually engaged in our local politics, are having conversations regarding the issues that we're faced with? We don't do that. What we rather do is talk about it indirectly instead of speaking directly about the change that needs to happen. And so I asked the question tonight, are you willing to have direct conversations for in any aspect of your life, to really start to understand who you are, but also how you operate when you're dealing with others? And so and the American individualism, I thought, was really fascinating, because he says we really, in the church, we should have the perspective that we are serving Christ is not about ourselves, but rather we are a part of a collective body doing the work that God has called us to do. And when we don't do that, what we have started to see in our churches over generations is the constant conflicts that we have, instead of working on the actual goal of going out to win lost souls, because we are still stuck in the American individualism, and we carry that over into church. And church is not about self. It is about the glorification of God and going out to help others. And so Dr. Halverstad is very masterful, I think, over these chapters, really speaking to a lot of noise. You hear a lot of noise, the airplanes. He's very masterful about speaking really about changing contextual factors, factors that really shape us, factors that really are moving around with us. And so I hope tonight that all of us really start to look at ourselves, as we said, working it out, but also ask the question tonight I want us to really shape tonight. Are you going to be direct, or are you going to be indirect? And that is going to be, that's a lot. I said a lot in that opening, but it's really, really important. So let's go on to some of the things that Dr. Haverset says in the chapter. And he points out some rules that we should follow when we are engaging in conflict. He says, you should establish some ground rules that are important to take away the individualism and really speak about the actual issue. So he goes on to say no labeling of persons or groups who disagree. He also says no attacks on current or past communal leaders. Propose what change you would rather have than just harping on what you don't like. I always tell people when I do investigations in my job, and there's a conflict, I usually ask the person who has presented the conflict to me, what resolution would you like? And it can't be just, I want to be transferred, because that really doesn't really solve anything. But rather, what can you offer a really solid solution? Because if you don't actually get to the root, it's just going to happen someplace else when you get to a different location. So the question is, I always ask the question, what do you propose that's concrete? And we should take the same approach in the church. We have to look at what would you rather change, but not harping on what you don't like, but just talking about what you want to change. Talk about specifics, not generalities. So don't be general in your conversation. Respect and explore different experiences of the same circumstances or event. So don't just lump it just about you, but understanding what's going on around you, and respect others and explore their different experiences and what they bring to the table. I think a lot of times we write off people because, they may not do it the way we want them to do it, but that does not mean they're not doing it. We have to understand their experiences. And again, also recognizing the triggers. We also have to assess factors by recognizing their benefits and costs rather than by judging them all as all bad. We are quick to point out what is wrong rather to discussing what is right and how we can actually resolve the situation. So he says, establish these ground rules. If you are in a conflict with someone, you say, we're going to have a conversation, but let's establish before we even get into it that we're not going to label, we're not going to denigrate each other, we're not going to attack, but we're going to stick to the issue. If I said you move that pew to that row and I don't like it, don't add, I don't like that you had 15 people sitting in a row and you wore this red dress and I didn't like it. No, just actually talk about the actual issue, which is you move the pew, and could you explain to me why you moved the pew? And maybe after the explanation, if you can come up with a resolution. And I think the hard part is that you have to come up with a resolution, that it's a win-win for everyone. And so we have to have those tough conversations. So again, Halverstadt brings up, and he does this in all the chapters about fair and dirty fighting criteria. And we see again in the church that we typically fight dirty because we know the person still has to love us, and we just feel as though, what, really at the end of the day, I believe my topic is the best, or my decision is the best, or I'm right. So we typically start to go on the attack, and we get so far away from the actual issue, we just start concentrating on the person and their attributes or their personal appearance, and we never actually speak about the actual issue. And so we need to get away from dirty fighting and really stick to we may fight for our interests, we may be passionate about what we're discussing, but what we need to do is we need to understand everyone brings unique experiences to the table. Everyone is coming from different walks of life, different upbringings, different educational background, but we're all here for one reason, and that is to serve and glorify God. And when we are in a situation when there's a conflict that arises, you need to have a discussion. I see a lot of times people are so passive aggressive, especially now in this culture when we are on YouTube, when we are text messaging, or Facebook, or Instagram. People do not really, they can send, messages that are somewhat skewed and really don't get the effect because we don't want to have those conversations. So start talking to your brother and your sister when there's a conflict that arises, and start to really discuss how you can resolve it. So Halverstadt also goes on to talk about, which I thought was really important in this chapter, is that we have to understand Christians don't fight. Christians shouldn't judge others. The Christians defend, I got that. He was saying, this is what he's saying, Christians should not do this. People think Christians don't fight. He says people think Christians don't judge others. He thinks that Christians defend God at all costs, that pastoral leaders are always right or always wrong. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. These are examples he's saying that we should try to get away from. being Christ-like means sacrificing yourself, being right at all cost. Good Christians don't compromise. Compromise is selling. Now we know this is not what we should not be doing. Don't rock the boat. Be perfect. It's never done that way. So Halford says that we need to get away from those understandings. We need to get away from those, and we need to start really saying that we confront differences openly. This is how we run an effective church. That you speak up for yourself. That you take responsibility for your feelings. That Christians fight fair. Christians fight fair. That you are accountable. That you win. If you win, we all win because we're on one team. You explore your differences. You know that everyone is valuable. You don't personalize differences. And you, to keep up with Jesus, keep changing. So he says those are the rules. Those are the ground rules. That's what we should really be doing, is to really confront those things openly. We shouldn't have any secrets of we don't like this person because it's something that happened. No, talk about the issue. Talk about the event so that everyone can win, so that nothing is broken. And that's what the last one, though, is to keep up with Jesus, keep changing. So these are examples of some unspoken rules, but he also gives us some very, very concrete things in terms of resolving the conflict. Gather as much information as possible from as many sources as possible. Stick with conflict resolution efforts to the end. Hang in there. The problem may not necessarily be resolved tomorrow. If you have a conversation today, it may not end up being resolved tomorrow, but keep on working at it. Keep on pressing to really come up with a resolution. Learn when to call a timeout. It's okay to say, you know what? We need to take a break. We need to come back. We need to regroup. We need to circle back. It's okay to allow cooling down periods. Don't make snap judgments about those behaviors who annoy you. We quickly, sometimes, always are saying, I don't like this person for whatever reason, but don't make snap judgments. Admit your mistakes and limitations. That's important. When the body has reached a consensus, do your best to be a part of it rather than resist it. That is absolutely important. When the body is moving in one direction and we've reached a consensus, don't be the one who's constantly fighting. Don't resist it. But in order to have understanding how we're moving forward, understand that you have to work with people, understand the limitations, but say, this is what I am going to do. So Halverstad is really giving us some really good ground rules in this chapter. But I really want us to concentrate again about that direct versus indirect, because I think that's important. I think a lot of times we act in an indirect manner because we don't want to address the actual issue. And then what starts to happen when we act indirectly, I think I've used this example before. I'll tell one person, I'll tell someone else about the person I actually have a problem with, instead of going to the person I have a problem with. And then it starts to build up. And then finally I have this large blow up because I've never went to the actual person that I have a problem with. So be direct in your approach. Go directly to the person and express to them how you are feeling. And it's going to be tough. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy. We are sometimes dealing with some very sensitive issues, but it is certainly important for us to go forth and have these conversations. So, Halverstad again gives us some very good rules. He also tells us that when we are dealing with the conflict, and as I just mentioned, we speak only for ourselves. I can't speak for the pastor. I can't speak for the first lady on how they feel about a conflict, because the way I may interpret it may be a totally different interpretation of what they have. So if they don't have a problem and I have a problem, then I need to speak from my own voice. I can't say that the pastor didn't like when you do that today. The pastor didn't say anything about it. I'm the one who had a problem with it. So speak for yourself. A lot of times we don't speak for ourselves. We try to cast the blame on someone else when we're really the ones who are dealing with the issue. We may challenge perceptions, but not motives. Again, understanding that our perception of it may be different, but the motive may have been a very good motive. So understand that. We also must remember we should not permit personal attacks on others. That's important. Personal attacks on others, it's wrong and hurtful. If you have a legitimate concern about a conflict or you're having a conflict with someone in the church, go and talk to them. But don't insert personal attacks. It's just a wrong thing to do when you really should just be about the issues that you are faced with. Feelings will be acknowledged, but not acted out. I may be angry, but I'm not going to flip that table. I may be angry, but I'm not going to reach across the table and grab you up. I'm going to acknowledge that I'm angry. Like I was angry with the pastor about that lottery ticket. I'm just playing. But I'm not going to go across and say anything to him, but you will acknowledge how you're feeling. It's okay to say I'm hurt. It's okay to say I'm upset. It is okay to say I'm sad or I feel disheartened by the things that you are saying. But once you have established that you've acknowledged these are your feelings, how do we address it at that point without acting it out? I may be hurt, but again, don't do something so malicious to someone that you can't come back from the brink. So it's okay to acknowledge how you are feeling, but again, work things out. So, Halverstadt, and this was actually a short chapter, and I went over some of these points. Overall, tonight, when we're dealing with changing contextual factors, is essentially saying you have the ability to make the change. You have the ability to resolve the conflict. You have the ability to really steer the conversation in a way that it's not attacking people, it's not putting them down, but that you're maintaining their dignity, as you have respect for them. Albeit you may have a conflict, you are still willing to work things out. But that is the key phrase. You have to be willing to work it out. You can't be, willing to sit on the sidelines and pout the whole time, but you have to get in the game, and you really have to start saying, I want to be a team player, and I know that we can do it. I know that we can work together to resolve any issues that we are facing. And I just hope that all of us this evening really work on that. Firstly, I don't know if there's any questions in that chat. I don't have.
No.
Okay. But I was saying my last point on this, and I hope that we all got something out of this tonight. That we have the ability to make change. We have the ability to be direct and not indirect. If you're dealing with something, a problem, go head on and resolve it. So tomorrow, next week, I hope that everyone reads chapter 10, which is coaching principles, which is step 3, constraining strategies. And we're almost done. I think there's 13 chapters in this book, if I'm not mistaken. And then the pastor and I, we were discussing, we do want to try to have an actual. They didn't see that. What we're going to try to do is we're actually going to try to do maybe after we finish the last chapter, actually have actual interactive. We actually can create a conflict, and using the tools that we have off this book, we actually maybe we can do some type. You call in and chime, and we actually have a conflict resolution time, and we'll actually be able to resolve the issue, and people can chime in and really start to, and don't try not to bring us some real life ones that you're doing right now in the church, and you want to try to call people out. Yeah. So we want to reenact, just an issue that may have happened, that we can talk about it, and we can use the examples from the book. So start thinking about that, because we're getting close to the chapter. Close to the end of the book, and I hope all of you have started to really utilize some of the tools that Dr. Halverstadt has given us in terms of being direct, of understanding how to fight fair, really being reflective on what you bring to the table. That is quite important. So I hope we all enjoyed the conversation tonight. I was not trying to rush. Typically, the First Lady does feed me before the Bible study, but that didn't happen tonight. So I'm a little hungry, but I love her. I know she wasn't saying that. I'm just joking. No, it was a really short chapter. So, but I thank the pastor and the First Lady for their hospitality as always. I love them dearly. Although they make fun of me highly. But anyway, hope everyone has a good rest of the week, and I look forward to seeing everyone on Sunday. If you didn't have the opportunity on Sunday, you weren't there, I encourage everyone to go back to listen to the sermon on on Sunday, from Sunday. It was powerful, and it really is necessary. So go listen to it. But thank you all. I'll see you next week.